Hello, everybody. Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Bolton Hall Museum. You wonder how these things begin. It begins with a Glen. It begins with a season. For want of a better word, we might as well call September. That quote is from one of my favorite plays. It's from The Fantastics. It was written by Tom Jones and Harvey Schmidt, and I like to break it out this time of year. Every time I get an audience in September. Welcome. My name is Joe DeCenzo. I'm your MC today. We have a very special program. The Foothills Poet Laureate, Kathleen Travers, has put together just a resounding lineup of featured readers. And we'll be treated to those, and they'll be introduced shortly. I want to ask you all, if any of you are carrying a device similar to this, please take a moment and silence it. Or if you want to take photos, that's fine. There's a switch on it where you can take the shutter sound off and all of that. And I want to, first of all, thank our hosts, the Little Landers Historical Society. They grant us the use of this hall. This is called Bolton Hall. And it's actually should be called Bolton Hall because Bolton Hall is the name of the man for whom this beautiful community meeting place was named. And for the open readers, this is just unusual because there are 3 features. It's going to be 1 minute for the open read. If you go a minute 30, I'll give you the bell. So please just be aware of the piece you choose to bring up here, and that also includes introduction. So keep your introduction brief. And then next month we get back and you can lay into us for 3 or 4 minutes, okay? At the refreshment table, that is brought to us thanks to the generosity of you all. We accept donations, and that helps not only support the refreshments table, but we cobble a donation, and we give that to Bolton Hall Museum every so often, and it keeps the doors open, keeps the lights on. It shows our appreciation to the volunteers who are here, and they help keep this place running, and in turn, we give them your wonderful words, and the melody, and the warmth and camaraderie of the poetry meeting. So thank you. Before we get started, I want to introduce the Poet Laureate of the Foothills, Kathleen Travers. She's going to tell you what's special about today. Kathleen?
Now we can hear the sounds echo off the walls, which is a lovely feeling. Before I get started with what's today, thank you. Before I get started with what today is all about, I'd like to introduce to you an idea that I'm hoping will spread. I love collective nouns, things like school of fish or murder of crows. Today's reading has suggested to me the perfect one for poets. There's never been a collective noun that's held for poets. Sometimes they're a little derogatory, sometimes they're silly, but I think a utopia of poets. That's what it should be. So if you ever have an opportunity to use poets in the collective, please, let's all be a utopia of poets. Utopia. We are thanks to St. Thomas More and the Greek for the word utopia, literally both good place and no place, or the perfect society that cannot exist, or the perfect world in the beloved's arms. Examples of utopias include historical intentional communities like the Shakers, and futuristic societies depicted in fiction, such as the post-scarcity world of Star Trek and the technologically advanced and ecologically focused city of Arcosanti. Utopias are often defined by universal ideals like peace, equality, and shared prosperity, though many fictional examples also highlight how seemingly perfect societies can have hidden flaws or drawbacks. Southern California had 2 attempted utopian colonies, one of which was founded where you now sit. It grew from the concepts of an American lawyer, author, and activist who worked on behalf of the poor and started the Back to the Land movement at the beginning of the 20th century. His name was Bolton Hall. And as Joe already pointed out to you, yes, you ironically sit in a structure which is surely more correctly Bolton Hall. He said in his 1908 book, A Little Land and a Living, surely is better than desperate struggle and wealth. A little land and a living surely is better than desperate struggle and wealth. The Little Landers colonies were attempts at small-scale cooperative agriculture in California, organized by journalist and writer William Ellsworth Smythe. Smythe's idea, inspired by Hall's A Little Land and a Living, was that a group of families should have small farms, about 1 or 2 acres, and market their produce cooperatively. Therefore, anything they didn't consume themselves, they could trade with each other and then take the surplus to market and buy nails if they needed them. Because there was, of course, the suggestion that there were free building materials to be had out here in these hills, and all that you needed was a bag of nails. It was a little harder than that. The first colony in San Ysidro, San Diego, California, was inaugurated in early 1909. The colonies were not successful, and by 1925, the last one was almost completely abandoned. This one became a city. First, Los Terrenitos, the Little Lands, then Tujunga. It died in 1933 when it was subsumed by the city of Los Angeles. Before the Tujunga colony perished, it left us with this building, the meeting house of the colony, a National Historic Monument, and on the registries of California, an our fair city. And when you leave today, look to the south, to the top of the hill opposite us, for the cross of San Ysidro, the patron saint of small farms, which is itself a historic cultural monument to the city of Los Angeles. Note that the very last vote of the colony was for the name of their 10-year city, Tujunga, so profoundly, beautifully, one of only 2 Los Angeles cities named for the indigenous space it occupied. Pacoima, rushing waters, Tujunga, the place of the old woman, for the shape of the hill. I'm going to give you a quote from Wallace Morgan, who was the newspaperman who settled out here and ran a newspaper from the inauguration of the colony until the 50s, the Record Ledger. San Ysidro, patron saint of little homes, little farms, was not a saint of the Catholic Church according to John McGroarty, who was a poet laureate of the state of California. He was a Spanish peasant, and his name, McGroarty said, indicates he was probably a Jew. Thus, the dedication of this monument was sponsored by an organization of laymen held around a cross that was raised in honor of a saint who was a Jew and blessed by a Catholic priest during ceremonies involving all the churches in that. And here's my offering for today, the view from the cross of San Ysidro, Mount McGroarty, Tujunga. In selling the idea of it, McGroarty, the scribe and Oostergaard, wove the fable blood of San Ysidro, in which the saint had ceased his work to help the grandam find her goat, whereupon, in his absence, an angel took those labors up. A parable in which self-interest was replaced by the spirit For in the hard life of farming dry and rocky soil, only with each other's help could one survive. With the convert's passion and the spirit of a man reborn, having thrown shackles of nocturnal asthma in the sweet and solemn breathing air of the Verdugos, the scribe sold the broken colony his ecumenical hopes. So much so, they built his cross in weeks and pledged to find the funds to light it. Perhaps by raising it, a monument with manifest ideals, a people perpetuate such standards. Perhaps not, but consider this. On the Antipodal Verdugos in July of 24, the Times reported on quite different pageantry beneath the cross, rather several, burning, as 800 on the Glendale Hills joined that city's Ku Klux Klan. Or this, that when 30s Tahunga Jewelry founded their Temple Shomrei Imuna, Guardians of the Faith, the Women's Club gave them a home for 5 years while they built. This, while La Crescenta's chapter of the Bund held pro-Nazi rallies at their parks, and Pasadena practiced covenants excluding Jews and rapists. 4 months, and they had lit the cross, and at a time when night pulled a drape of perfect darkness on the hills, the cross was more than cross, but spoke of noble-minded roots, what they valued in others and hoped for from themselves. And perhaps in those black nights, its light was consolation for their failed utopian dream, broken by the harshness of life in a place known as the Rock. Introduce our features. Now, Joe will come up and introduce our open mic readers, who, a reminder, will only be reading for 1 minute this month only, to allow us to get in our 3 features. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. Before we get started, looks like we could use a couple more chairs. Let's pull a couple more chairs out from the storeroom, please. Yeah, Eric. Thanks, Eric. Open mic. A few open mic first. Yeah. Thanks. This is local resident Eric Esteban. Santa Esteban. Sorry.
Got it.
I've known him for years. We're grateful for him. He's helping us videotape so that we can post this to some link. We'll put it on YouTube, and then we'll attach a link to the Village Poets website for all to view. But thank you again. And as you were speaking today, please go ahead and get close enough to the mic. It'll help the recording immensely. I want to first introduce, she's former Poet Laureate. I believe she was Poet Laureate number 9, Pamela Shea. Please welcome Pamela Shea.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Well, very interestingly, very serendipitous experience here. I'm going to be reading a poem about some of the local history that I found from using information from Marlene Hitt, who is our founder, and no longer with us, but she is here in spirit. Her book was called Sunland and Tahunga from Village to City. So I'm taking I wrote my poem with information from her book. Beautiful village, nestled in SoCal foothills, Sutherland with agriculture, Tahunga, a utopia, two exquisite spots united. Alongside forest named Angeles National, settled by Spaniards, a bit later missionized, transformed to cattle frontier. Land of pioneers turned into thriving city, with clean air above, caressing rolling foothills. Beautiful forever home, where I roam, writing my poems. And then a dedication to Marlene, marvelous Marlene. Poetry, mother, encouraging, uplifting, critiquing gently, always supportive. I feel her presence with me when I put pen to paper.
Thank you. And thank you for honoring Marlene, definitely somebody who brought everybody together regularly while she was here. I want to invite up next, is it Lyda?
Yes.
Lyda Bush-Lober. Welcome, Lyda.
Okay, so my latest poem just came out in the lyric, which is mostly formal verse. So if any of you do formal verse, it's a good market. So, okay, this is called Listen. What sounds say summer? A splash from the pool, ceiling fans humming that don't really cool, skateboards on sidewalks, children at play, cubes of ice clinking, cicadas all day, the buzz of a mower, a sizzling grill, the whine of mosquitoes, too legion to kill, crickets at evening, the whippoorwill's call, till dry rustling leaves prophesy fall. And then I like to flip things on their head. This poem was in an online journal called Lighten Up Online. Scorched. Summer is a-coming in when flies and fleas proliferate, mosquitoes, gnats, and all their kin swarm and buzz and masticate. Pavements sizzle in the heat. We battle crowds at beach and pool. Our sandaled soles melt on our feet. We can't remember being cool. AC barely makes a dent in humid air that sits like lead. Running it costs more than rent, but without it we'd be dead. The unrelenting sun beats down on flora, fauna, and us folks. The earth and all its contents brown, but climate change is just a hoax.
Just exquisite, Lyda. Thank you. She did say masticate. Masticate.
No.
Please, decorum. I'm overjoyed to introduce our next reader. I've known her through my arts and culture group that she is a member of. She has also worked at our local arts center, the Majority Arts Center. Please welcome Joanna Gates.
Ironically, I printed some things out, and then I thought, oh, I have to on my phone, so we'll do a little bit of both, right? Thank you, everybody. Utopia. I wrote this poem after our last meeting, inspired by this idea, and it's called American Dream. Taking the time to ease my mind, I gently close my eyes, dreaming of my happy place, gazing high into the sky. I wish I may, I wish I might, the words drift through my mind, while dreaming of a place of seat that I may never find. My breath turns white as it fills the air, slowly passing through my lips, reflecting on the journey of all things that I will truly miss. If and when this dream may end, I find this very place where I can finally clear my head, I will lay my soul to rest. I have a little bit more time, which I'd like to read another poem called The Tree of Life. Waving in the passing breeze, bathed in the falling rain, frozen by the winter's frost, thawed by the morning sun. With time my roots grow strong, with age they wither and fall. Though within my death comes new life, with blossoms in the spring. All the while the growing child, standing the test of time, is ready for its own journey to begin. age and experience comes wisdom, and growth, and strength. To hold me down, and with insight, it sets me free. That one I wrote back in 2007, actually edited in 2017, and brought it back to life.
Thank you, Joanna. Very mindful and most appropriate poems for the day. What is the website where people can find you if they're interested in following up with any of your art?
Yes, actually, it's the Mindful Mind, but it's mindfulmindla.com. Some really wonderful things on that site. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to take a stab at this. I actually wrote this after I had learned some of the history of this area, and glad today's theme gives me an opportunity. It's called Tahunga Nuggets. From far away, in field afar, the foothills of our home, where Sunland and Tahunga meet, along the river Rhone, from deep within the canyon's cleft across the fertile vale, the treasure that lies mocking every shovel, pick, and pail. It isn't gold or diamonds that lie buried in the ground. It's the mother lode of river rock our little landers found. The bane of every plowshare and demise of every blade when trying to sow their crops or plant the trees to give them shade. Oh, the labor they endured, and oh, the stress upon the ox to clear the furrowed land of those incessant river rocks. They hammered, pried, and plowed to break the soil of its teeth, removing one to find there's dozens more beneath. For through the years the watershed had surged with heaven's rain, cascading down the hills, whose raging torrents would contain the boulders, gravel, sand, and silt that seemed to fill this space of land that we have come to know as the old woman's place. And that which would dissuade less hardy folk of the frontier, define their strength of character, and bid them settle here. And turning to that pile of rocks, they tightly lace their boots to build the strongest homes around and simply plant their roots. Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to invite Foothills Poet Laureate Kathleen Travers up to begin the featured program. Thank you, Kathleen.
Sorry it takes me so long to do this. I had a knee replacement surgery 3 weeks ago, and so I'm just so happy not to be on a walker anymore. Poet, writer, performer, and teacher Cecilia Wallach was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and grew up there and in rural Kentucky, one of 7 children of a homemaker and an airplane mechanic. She is a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship recipient and the author of 6 acclaimed collections of poems: Sacrifice, a Book Sense 76 selection in 2001, Tzigin, the Gypsy poem, featured in a commemorative exhibit at Auschwitz-Birkenau in 2020, Late, for which she was named Georgia Author of the Year in Poetry in 2004, Narcissus, winner of the Tupelo Press Snowbound Prize in 2006 and a finalist for the California Book Award, Carpathia, a finalist for the Milton Kessler Award in 2010, Earth, winner of the 2015 Two Sylvia's Press Chapbook Prize, and Serna Route, On the Road, a novel in vignettes. The text of Tzigin, the Gypsy poem, has been the basis for multidisciplinary performances in the US and Europe. It was translated into French and published as Tzigane, le poème, Giton, by Scribler Martin in 2014. Cecilia collaborates regularly with musicians, dancers, visual artists, and theater artists. Her work has been translated and published in French, German, Polish, Romanian, Bulgarian, Hungarian, Ukrainian, Hebrew, and Roma. She has given readings and led creative workshops across the US and around the world. In 2021-22, she was a Fulbright Scholar at the University of Breslau. Okay.
R-Z-E-S-Z-O-W.
Of course, in southeastern Poland, near the border of Ukraine. When she's not traveling, she lives in Los Angeles, and we're all the richer for it. Thank you.
Thanks. It's wonderful to be here. And, Kathleen's introduction and Joe's introduction and the poems I heard during the open mic and how I feel sitting in Bolton Hall reminds me of something. I was in Kentucky a few weeks ago when a good friend was giving a reading, and he was launching a new book, and he had invited people from his writer's group to read with him. And he said, we create in community. That's it, isn't it? We create in community. Even if that community is, I have this community on my bookshelves that fill my apartment, but also a human community and being together in person now. Difficult as it sometimes seems to get out of our houses and make the trek to wherever we have to go, being together in person is so important now. It's always important, but really important now. So I'm grateful to you for being here, and I'm grateful to Kathleen for inviting me, and I'm happy to have this space. And I'm even happy to be an American. It's a fraught time, and we all know that. I'm the granddaughter of immigrants who came from a place I have returned to many times. A very, very beautiful place. It's gorgeous. But they were starving. So they left. So I'm going to begin with a poem for that place, which is the lower Carpathian Mountains in southeastern Poland near the Ukrainian border. It was always kind of a marginal, liminal place, and it's a very haunted place. The historian Timothy Snyder has dubbed it the Bloodlands. So this is the Bloodlands, Carpathia. The title of the poem is In the Name of Whatever Country This Is. It's warm here now, and the fields have no names. The fields have no women singing and bending toward them, no men with their backs in the sun. Still, it's warm here, and something might grow. Something might sow itself from the earth of the fields of whatever country this is. Then the ghosts will have something to harvest. The ghosts will have something with which to make bread. Their coats in the forest hanging like mist, their shoes in the river washing away. Then what a feast it might be at last, in the name of the long gone, the action dead. Let come the rain and the animals too. Let them be eaten again in the name of the God of whatever country this is, where the fields, almost naked, lie down to flower, where peace, like the mouth of a flower, opens to swallow, be swallowed, the fields, in which she comes to America, circa 1913, for my grandmother. So there you are, landed in the little boat of the only self you have, the only skirt, the only scarf, your hair in a long brown braid of the only girl you've ever been. Now, Here comes the whistle's scream, the law's quick shove, the crowd of others pushing past with their cardboard suitcases, cloth sacks, their ragged bundles at their backs. When you step away from them, you stand in all that sharpened light, alone. Beneath your blouse, a little pouch of herbs, dried flowers, earth of home. A little charm to keep you safe in this new country with growth. Here comes the hunger. Here come the machines. Here comes the god of cash and sweat. Here comes the egg that turns to child inside your body. Here comes death. Here comes America, my love. All shipping. There is no turning back. I'm going to read a poem for one of my grandmother's sisters. I never knew my grandmother. She was murdered before I was born, and that's a whole other story. But her sisters, my father's aunts, we called Teta, and they were something. They did what they had to do to survive. So these are all, in my mind, these are all poems about Utopia's lost and searched for, lost and searched for. So this is for my great aunt, Teta. And they came from this place that sort of disappeared behind them. Teta, it's winter in Pittsburgh again. Dark brick city of smokestacks and soot. And we're walking up Broadway Avenue, past billboards and vacant lots, through the slush of snow and cinders as the streetcars slur past, ghosts in our flowered babushkas and shabby coats, shopping bags weighing down our arms. We've bought cans of beets, heads of cabbage, meat ground fresh that will squeeze into fists, and we don't flinch when the crew-cut kids hiss DPs at our backs. We're not ashamed anymore, at last, to have come from nowhere, nothing, dirt. The village you fled as a young girl, gone. The houses burned, and the fields you worked into rows of green, grown wild again. Once you spewed honey into my mouth, because my arms and legs were like sticks, because I itched and wept and wanted more than sweetness to know who I was. But you sighed. No one wants to remember that stuff. How you came to this new country stinking of shit. How you sold bootleg hooch for cash, your own smooth flesh for a rich man's song. The rich growing fat on the fat of the land, while you buried one child in a pauper's grave, raised two others on blood money, spit. All your sins in a basket too heavy to lift, and your body already a heap of grief the day you slipped in the alley and fell in that garden you made of ground bone ash under a slit of tin-washed sky. And then you never stood up again. I watched as you shrank in your narrow bed, blind, but you gripped my hand and sang the old song of the little bird in a language I still don't understand. Dark syllables fluttering just out of reach until your shadow whispered once. Your whole life, a ragged story, stitched into breath, unstitched again. Teta, we've never been much in this world, although we were many, too many once. The children's children who circled your table, blowing out candles, eyes tilted like yours. Our faces, the same face, all over again, the face of the stranger wherever we turned. My cousin, the Cossack, the Gypsy, the Jew, my cousin, the dark Slav, my cousin, the slave. And we'll never belong to this place where you came with your one suitcase tied with rope, with your a shape like a shadow risen from earth, some mute root pulled from a meadow where wildflowers blazed in the summer and winter lay down. This is America, Teta. You're dead, and our dying means nothing here. Give me your bags. My latest book is not my book. It's the testimony of Ted Gall. This is a little chapbook. And it's written all in the words of this man, Ted Gall, who went into the coal mines at age 12, was in World War I by the time he was in the service, by the time he was 14 or 15. This is Ted at 14. He was a badass. He helped, he worked with my grandmother and my grandmother's stepson and my dad's stepfather to really try to unionize the miners. They led the biggest mining strike in history in the town of Russellton in 1927. So some of that history is here. That's really an integral part of my family history and an integral part of my identity. These were people, my dad all his life was a union man. They really believed in the union, that this would create a kind of more utopian, more perfect society. What a lot of people don't know is that the early labor movement in the United States was completely entwined with the early civil rights movement. People trying to form unions were mostly immigrants. They were immigrants who had come here often because they were lied to, often because they were forced to, or they were starving. And they were really kind of indentured servants to the coal companies, to the mines. And they also knew that if there wasn't solidarity, if they didn't create solidarity that included the African American people who were coming up from the South, that there was no chance for anyone. So Ted Gall was good friends with Paul Robeson. He knew Langston Hughes and Marian Anderson. He's quite a guy. Dropped out of school at 12, but every word you will hear is from the pen of Mr. Ted Gall. I'm just going to read a few sections of this, but you have to imagine badass. Sarah. Which is probably not too hard to do. I hope it's not too hard. Section 1, mining, 1918 to 1920s. You had to load 20 ton out of there. That was for your shift. Then you had at least 5 ton of stuff that you threw away that was no good. And maybe about 10 tons that you got paid for if you were lucky. Then your 30 cents a ton made you $3.80 per day. And then you had to pay for rent on your lamp and buy your power. Of course, you had a lot of work that was called dead work that you gave to them. Putting up support poles, dynamiting, etc. That was for free. You only got paid for the tonnage that crossed the scales. Then you had guys down there that were cheap on scales. You were lucky if you ended up with $1 a day. After they had the machine coal taken out, then they had the pickmen who would follow them where it was too dangerous anymore to go back in with a machine. Then the pickmen would go in there and hit the face. If you just hit the face with your pick, the coal would just fly out because of the squeeze on it. Then you worked like mad. When you're doing the pick work, you can hear that limestone cracking up there above you. Boundaries were set by the engineers. Lots of times, mistakes were made. For instance, a mine was worked out. It would gradually fill with water. Sometimes the weight of the water would just push that coal right out of there. Then you were in trouble. Most falls happened just like that. The company, even if they knew they had a bad roof, wouldn't do anything about it until they had a fall. Then they only took care of the effects. Prevention, that was something else again. That they didn't do, because that took money. Now in Rural Ridge, the town next to Russellton, going down toward the river by the turnpike, they had a fall. A man was caught under it. And they had mules in the mine to move the cars around, and a mule was caught in the fall too. There was a lot of screaming and commotion, and the men working in the other mine heard it and came over to where the fall was. The boss, he was sitting on the mule's head to try to keep it from thrashing around. Now the first man that got over there, the boss told him to sit on the mule's head and to hold that mule's head down. This old Polish man said, "Shit on you. That man over there is understuff." The Polish man was fired because he wanted to help the man under the fall instead of sitting on the mule's head. A mule cost money, and they could always hire another man. And then Roosevelt came in. And then you were allowed to organize for unions again. But the company had people who would tell the bosses what was going on. They maneuvered a fellow to work beside me. He was telling the company everywhere I went, and almost my thoughts. The coal and iron police, they controlled all the roads around the coal camps. I went into Butler County to organize there. I didn't even have one contact to talk to. I would go and wait alongside the road when the people came out from work. I would walk alongside them and talk to them as they were walking home. They were frightened. They were afraid to talk to anyone for fear that someone would report them to the company. At Russellton, after we had reorganized there and had a semblance of a union, we had no way of collecting union dues and had no contract with the company. Everything was more or less free will. Good fellows. Strong fellows. Mentally, morally, every way strong fellows, but they were frightened. We had to collect dues out on the road, on the public road. They would drop their money on the ground and then walk across the road to the other side so that they wouldn't even be seen talking to us. We succeeded. We succeeded. I'm going to read two more little poems to finish. I have copies of this book here, and I have copies of my first book. And if you buy, because the first book is from a press that's no longer storing books, so you might know that if you've published a book, things get pulped. So you're going to have them pulped. If you buy one book, you can have a copy of the other one for free of the first book. So that's the deal. This is a tiny, tiny little prose poem from my friend Carolyn Whitley. Rainbow's End. Rainbow's End is what we call her house. What we call Mommy C's house. Here, on the walls of her house, portraits of daughters who died too young, and old tinted photographs of ancestors in their finest finery. And here, above the kitchen sink, in black and white, in a gilt-edged frame, a woman who'd been enslaved, standing, feet splayed, on the earth of her garden, on the earth of her own garden, hand on her hip, her earth. And this is my last poem is a poem for this country. It's written in 2018, but you can pray anytime. I would love it if you put your phone down. I would so love it. It's so distracting to me, you know. I know people think they're listening and doing, but it's when somebody's live in front of you, it's just heartbreaking to see somebody texting the whole time. So thanks for putting me down. Prayer for 2018. Surely there was a river once, but there is no river here. only a sound of drowning in the dark between the trees, the sound of wet, and only that. Surely there was a country that I called my country once, before the thief who would be king made other countries of us all, before the bright screens everywhere in which another country lives. But what is it anyway to live, to breathe, to eat, to love? Surely there was a real earth, wild and green here, blossoming, land of windswept plains and blood, then of shackles and of iron, and then the black smoke of its cities and the laying down of laws, under which some flourished, if you call that flourishing, and from which others would have fled had there been anywhere to flee. My country, which is cruel and which is beautiful and lost. Surely there were notes that made a song, a pledge of birds, and not a child in any cage, no man or woman in a ditch. Surely what we meant was to anoint some other god, one made of wind, starlight, pulsing, heart that matched the human heart. Surely that God watches us now, one eye in the river, one eye where the river was.
The first time that I introduced the idea to the collected community that we would have a reading on Utopia, somebody said, "Yeah, but how many poems are you going to get on Utopia?" How many poems indeed? Absolutely. Timothy Steele holds degrees from Stanford University and Brandeis University and has taught at Stanford, UCLA, and Santa Barbara, USC, and California State University of Los Angeles, where he is a professor emeritus and president's distinguished professor. Steele's 5 collections of poetry include The Color Wheel, 1994, and Toward the Winter Solstice, 2006. Steele has also written Criticism and All the Funds in How You Say a Thing, an explanation of rhyme and versification, a practical guidebook to the forms and meters of English poetry, about which actor Stephen Fry wrote, "Before you go to meet your maker, go to make your meter." And you couldn't be in better hands than those of Timothy Steele. Among Steele's honors are a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Peter I.B. Levan Younger Poets Award from the Academy of American Poets, the Los Angeles Penn Center's Award for Poetry, the Commonwealth Club of California Medal for Poetry, and the Robert Fitzgerald Award for Excellence in the Study of Prosody. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to read this afternoon.
Thank you for coming, and it's a special pleasure to read with Cecilia and Suzanne. I thought I would begin my part of the reading with a poem which describes a woman waking at dawn, and it treats the process of waking as being analogous to that larger process by which matter was stirred into life. And because of its subject and setting, the poem takes as its title of the Roman goddess of dawn. Aurora, your sleep is so profound, this room seems a recess awaiting consciousness. God's curtains drawn around the postered bed confute each waking attribute, volition, movement, sound. Outside, though, chilly light shivers a petal's coil of iridescent oil. Windows sunstruck at night. Doves strut along the edge of roof and terrace ledge or drop away in flight. And soon enough you'll rise, long gowned and self-aware, brushing life through your hair. You'll notice with surprise the way your glass displays twin miniature your face in your reflective eyes. Goddess, it's you in whom our clear hearts joy and chafe. Awaken then, vouchsafe ideas to resume. Draw back the drapes, let this quick muffled emphasis flood light across the room. I was thinking today of the subject of Utopia, and I was struck by the quotation reading about Bolton Hall that Kathleen mentioned, a little land and living is better than a desperate struggle and great wealth, and was reminded of the biblical proverb, better is a dinner of herbs where love is than a fattened ox and hatred with it. And some years ago, I wasn't trying to write about anything related to Utopia, but I wrote a little sonnet about an herb garden which presented it as a kind of commonwealth of plants and small insects and animals, and it seemed appropriate to read today. It has one word that is slightly unusual, a botanical term, umbels, which are those little clusters of white flowers that radiate from the central star of certain plants like dill. Herb garden. The lizard, an exemplar of the small, spreads fine adhesive digits to perform vertical push-ups on a sunny wall. Bees grapple spikes of lavender or swarm the dill's gold umbrellas or little clumps of thyme. Bored with its trellis, a resourceful rose festooned the nearby cedar tree to climb and to festoon with floral furbelows. Although the heat-stunned sunflower looks half dead, the way it shepherd's crookline hangs its head, the herbs maintain their modest self-command. Their fragrances and colors warmly mix, while quarrying between the pathways bricks, ants build minute volcanoes out of sand. Sometimes the natural order is upset in one way or another, and I encountered an instance of this some years ago when I was flying to Alabama and transferred in the Memphis airport and saw a little bird in the terminal. And it's not uncommon, at least in my experience, to see birds in transit terminals or in parking garages, but usually they're gulls or house finches or sparrows. And this bird was a little different in voice and color, and partly because it was April too, it's the irony of the situation struck me. And when I returned home from the trip, I wrote this poem. Toward the end of the poem, there's a word that I wouldn't have had to gloss 25 years ago when the poem was written, but I maybe should today, and that is skycaps. There, of course, the quarters and the curb signs were very common in my youth and maybe heyday, but have become increasingly rare with post 9/11 security and with online check-in and with the little baggage self-service kiosks inside homes. In the Memphis airport, above the concourse, from a beam, a little warbler pours forth song. Beneath him hurry humans strain. Some draw wheeled suitcases along, or from a beeping belt or purse, apply a cell phone to an ear. Some pause at banks of monitors where times and gates for flights appear. Although by nature flight endowed, he seems too gentle to reproach these souls who soon will climb through cloud in first class, business class, and coach. He may feel that it's his mistake he's here, but someone ought to bring a net to catch and help him make his own connections north to spring. He cheats and drills on, swift and sweet, though no one inside hears his strains. Outside, telescopic tunnels greet the cheeks of their arriving planes. A ground crew welcomes and assists luggage hit sky caps, treating bags like careful ornithologists, banded with destination tags. Those poems are, Kathleen mentioned my interest in different forms of poetry. There are all sorts of wonderful forms of poetry, metrical and otherwise. And the first three poems are in traditional English meters, iambic lines. You have a certain number of syllables and a certain pattern number of accents per line. But there are all sorts of other forms. And this next poem is in one of those. It's in so-called syllabic meter. The line is determined by a fixed number of syllables, 7 in this case, but the accents and the number of accents per line are left to shift for themselves. The poem concerns the idea of a golden age, a time when things were better than they are now. It can be mythic context like the Garden of Eden or beginning of Hobbit's metamorphosis. The divine imprint is still on us. Or it can be a historical period like Athens during Pericles' early reign, or Lorenzo the Magnificent's time in Florence, reading Kelly's novel, which is set there. The poem tries to suggest that while the idea of a golden age is certainly attractive and perhaps something one would want to emulate in one way or another, it's really individual acts of generosity, kindness, courage, and fairness that make it the golden age. Golden age. Even in fortunate times, the nectar is spiked with woe. Gods are incorrigibly capricious, and the needy beg in Nineveh, or sleep in paper-dusting plazas of the new world's shopping malls. Meantime, the tyrant badges on conquest, while advisors angle for the ferment seek expedient paths. Heartbroken, the faithful advocate looks back on cities of the plain and trudges into exile. And if any era thrives, it's only because somewhere in a plane tree's shade, friends sketch the dust with theorems and proofs. Or because instinctively, a man puts his arm around the shoulder of grief and walks it for an hour or an age through all its tears and telling. I guess the Golden Age is sort of a precursor of Utopia, has been mentioned. Utopia is this funny little Greek coin that Thomas More made in 1516. His book of that kind of was introduced, and Utopia is, at least from Moore on, is often considered not simply as an ideal time, but a time involving the good, healthy regulation of institutions of political and social life. It's not sort of back in anything Adam and Eve times. I have my own ideas about Utopia and what might be done in this regard. And I was thinking that one of the sobering aspects of the concept of utopia is when it has been treated in literature, it has been most often treated as satire. But in any case, there were a couple epigrams about that. The first is called Monarchs versus Chefs. What's Marshall Pomp compared to Chow? Better to, pardon me, I'll start again. What's Marshall Pomp compared to Chow? Better to feed than bleed folk. If we had any sense, we'd bow not to the crown, but to the toque. Next time around, Alice Flowers for president, Mark Pittman for vice president. Some things from my lifetime seem in retrospect to be utopias. One community represented in an early sitcom is that of Fred Mertz's apartment building in which Larry dwelt. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz as Lucy and Vicky Ricardo. And in retrospect, there are a lot of nice things about that setup and that show. And anyway, this is about that. I love Lucy. Such innocence. Our age of dread would sink poor Lucy in a trice. Her hair would damn her as a red, and Ricky would be seized by ice. And then a very short love poem. Last night at Two Strings. The clock's dial, a luminous 2:10, its faint glow on pillow and sheet. I woke in a good fatigue and heat. We shared the dawn. And I, sensing again distances chill as the light on shades, was so uncertain, love, of our rest, that I woke you almost as I drew my chest against the warm wings of your shoulder blades. And I'll close my part of the reading with a poem, like the first one I read about waking at dawn. In this case, it's waking dawn in California. And listening in the twilight to night birds like the plow-wills and the owls gradually falling silent while the birds of the day start to rouse and sing. This always reminds me of the way the shifts were at the hospital that my mother worked at when my brother and sister and I were growing up. The nurses were on a schedule 7 to 3, 3 to 11, and the graveyard shift 11 to 7. And the shifts came around, and our meals, I manifest for us, our meals, our family meals, were governed to a certain extent by whether mom was coming home from work or going off to work. But anyway, I always found it interesting as a kid, the way that around the clock care was provided, and it seemed to me that the birds were performing a similar coordination, keeping their songs and calls going around the clock from night to day. There's one detail I should mention. My mom went to nursing school in the 1940s, and there were relatively few nursing colleges, and each college had a special cat. And so if you see pictures of nurses that era, they're all in the same starch white uniform, but the caps are different. And when I wrote the poem, I talked to Mom about it, and she sent me a replica of her cat. Which I thought was very nice. I said, you should keep it. Oh, no, I'm not going to go around. Sadly, she's good about that. The poem is called Changing the Dark. Prior to sunrise, as it's growing light, nocturnal birds relay the burden of their vocal arts to their diurnal counterparts. An owl hoots as a ode to the night, a finch chirps as a prelude to the day. It is as if the birds, wings notwithstanding, are passing the baton. They make me think as they converse of when my mother was a nurse. Each morning as the night shift was disbanding the day shift in the hospital now. Our breakfasts fit whichever shift she drew. By an unspoken rule, leaving for work or coming from it, she held a little family summit. We kids, the instant she excused us, flew out of the kitchen, prepared for school. I liked the way the shifts align, the flow and order they created. While the white dress all nurses wore expressed their brisk esprit de corps, their cats had different designs to show the colleges from which they graduated. Listening to the birds, I can infer which schools they went to. Still, like sensitively trained musicians, they're good at managing transitions, just as my mother and my colleagues were in looking after the infirm and ill. So, though it is a signal to a mate most birds send through the air, or else a claim to territory, their chorus seems to tell a story of former mornings and to correlate the continuities of song and care. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Timothy, very much for the serenity of your voice, your connections to family and utopia. I enjoy the allusions to mythology. That's first where I learned of Utopia and Aristophanes, the frogs, for instance. But the gods are certainly with us today. Normally, in this building in September, we'd have the AC and the fan on, and we would be muddling through. But it's a very beautiful day. I want to now invite you all to take a 15-minute break. There's some water, coffee, tea, hot chocolate. There's sandwiches beneath the foil covers there. And we hope you can return for the second portion of our show. And those who are here afterwards who participated in the read will have a class photo up here that we can then post on our blog so that everybody can see what Thank you. Is there anything else before we do it? So, in continuing with our theme, we really found out when the pioneers, and that's what we call them, the people that settled this area, they found out the riches and the treasure that they discovered was the wealth of community that is here. And it's known that, I want to say, George Harris, who was the nature builder of this, he actually selected personally this log that became the mantelpiece. And it is said that he has told everybody that consider every stone a symbol of the families that settled here in unity as a community. And there were weddings here, there were religious services of all different denominations. This was a building that became during times of trouble and stress. There were hospital services that were available here. There was also a jail in the back behind the kitchen. This was a jail cell. You did Utopia jail for a short time. And people were always wondering, well, he wasn't too straight with all of this. Yeah, you can find that out. Thank you. That's Sherry. Sherry is one of the docents here, and she's a longtime volunteer here at Bolton Hall Museum. But you notice these stones, it's not because he was lazy or sloppy. Can you tell what those stones might have been used for, why they jut out like that? Those were intended as a type of shelf because there was no electricity here. So those were a fine location for oil lamps because it's a much better place to put a burning glass of oil than on top of the wood mantelpiece. So that's what those were for. And we'll share with you as we grow near the end of the program some other things that are coming up here. But after we're done with Village Poets first, let me bring back at this time someone to Foothills Poet Laureate, Kathleen Travers. Thank you, Kathleen.
Our third feature of the day obviously requires no introduction. The goddess of Los Angeles poetry scene. Suzanne Lama's fourth poetry collection will be published this fall by the edgier end of What Books, their imprint giant claw, Crime Wave. She's the editor of Beyond Baroque Books imprint, the Pacific Coast Poetry Series, and the editor of the just-released anthology, national in scope, Poetry Goes to the Movies. Her individual poems have appeared in New Ohio Review, Plume, The New Yorker, are in the current issue of Poetry Salzburg Review, and forthcoming in Rattle. Suzanne's honors range from Dramalogue Awards and Women in Theater's Red Carpet Award to Outstanding Instructor Awards and Beyond Baroque's George Drury Smith Award. She was a 2018-2019 City of Los Angeles Fellow, and with that endowment evolved an ambitious series of 72 280-space utterances, tweets from hell. It's political. And yes, it's remained au courant, unfortunately. Please welcome Suzanne.
I am chuffed, as they are folks to say in the UK. Does anybody know, do they really say this in the UK? I say chuffed that you and I are still around after all these years. Cecilia and Timothy have got me thinking, and some of other people here have got me thinking more about Utopia than I have in a long time. And thinking also about the golden age. One of my favorite quotes of all times, and it's been attributed to different people, is this quote: if we could really get back to the golden age in history, we'd find everybody wandering around complaining about how yellow everything looked. That's the damn truth. I'll tell you. I mean, we look back on it now, you know, the 80s, oh, that was the great time, and the affluence, and the 90s, some cool things. Everybody in the was walking around complaining about something terrible going on in the government or somewhere else. Thinking about Utopia, for me, one thing people should do if they try to create a utopia is don't call it Utopia. Already, you are so going to fail right there. Call it something like a little community that's better than some other communities. Something, you know, start modest. Utopia to me means the beautiful, impossible, unobtainable world that can exist only in our imagination. It is the Shangri-La, the El Dorado, the lost city of the Incas. And when I think of it that way, I think we were all starting to come upon this idea, even as people were reading and the audience was listening to these poems. It's aspirational, and it's something that endures in the imagination. And I started thinking, at first I thought, I am so in trouble. I'm so in trouble. Because I'm supposed to address Utopia in this reading. This, everybody, is what Crime Wave looks like, okay? This is the book. And then you open it up, and it's the giant claw. It's like this poetry will kill you if you turn pages of it. I thought there was only one poem in here that I could read. And now I think, no, I can read this one. Because my most utopian, dreamy poems won't work unless I have something a little bit mischievous to set them up for contrast. And utopia means nothing if you don't know a little bit about a dystopian. And by the way, what I always tell my students, poetry loves paradox. And what a paradox we are in now. Dystopian things running amok out there, but here we are imagining and celebrating dystopia. Before I read this poem, it's got a little bit of mischievous things in it, a little humor, a little bit of an edge, but within it, characters are aspiring for something better, for something beautiful, for something mysterious and unattainable. I have notes in the back of Crime Wave, and the note to this particular poem gives this information. Flour, milk, eggs, baking powder, salt, and God is from my Evolving O Best Beloved series. The endearment appears in Kipling's Just So stories. In my series, the speaker of these poems seems to be talking sometimes to a young child, sometimes an older one, sometimes an adult, and sometimes there may be no one there at all. In order order to fit this poem into this book where there's a crime in almost every poem, I had to add a crime to it. It's very brief. I will even point that out. There's only a few words that I added just to make sure that there was a little crime, and I underlined it. And I'm not going to give such long introductions after this. There's one other little interesting note. Since this involves those tortillas or pancakes and things that show up with the face of Christ on them, I did research this out a little bit, and I found a memoir by a fellow whose mother had a tortilla with the face of Christ on it, and it was in a little shrine, and the whole time during his childhood, all these neighbors and these people and these out-of-towners kept coming by, knocking on the door, wanting to see the tortilla, and everybody was looking at the tortilla, which was now crumbled, and he was so humiliated throughout his childhood, and the school kids used to make fun of him. And so there's another example of somebody aspiring for the beautiful, mysterious world, and then the little kid, they're all going, hey, everyone has a tortilla. And everybody looks at it. Oh, best beloved, tell me if you know why the world over, when that woman bending toward the griddle, toward heat pushing through the AM chill, turns up a soft, brown impression of an unshaven face surrounded by loose hair. Why does she always think it's Jesus? And her proud, abruptly ennobled husband agrees, and her chattering neighbors, it's him, a miracle, as if they'd know that face anywhere. Beloved, take this instruction. Don't believe all you hear. It could be Juan Ponce de Leon, looking much as he did when he surveyed the fresh-growing land he named Pastua Florida, pointing, according to legend, his sharp little beard toward the waters of the Nile, the fountain of youth, searching, not finding, but even his beard hard at work. Or it could be his fellow Spaniard and relation, Rodrigo Ponce de Leon, the Marquis of Cadiz. But if the outline of Gently Singed Banner describes a head with luxurious gypsy curls and an artfully shaped beard and mustache of a man so careful with his looks he can afford to be careless with women, oh, that's Lindsay Buckingham, lead singer for Fleetwood Mac. Just as he looked that madcap summer in LA when everyone was sleeping with everyone else and getting divorced, and all of them, John and Christine McVie, Mick Fleetwood, Stevie Nicks, inhaling, breathing cocaine until it drifted from their garments like the sprinklings of Disney fairies. Little follies, little felonies, so light afoot. Damn, he was a handsome man. Those pancakes don't do him justice. But can we blame them, the folks who trudge home each Sunday from the market, lugging bags of onions, potatoes, slabs of meat, flour, enough for 3 days? They want mystery. Who doesn't? Sanctity, a visitation. They want it for breakfast. This morning, beloved, while you lay still asleep, the batter dreamed against the deep cast iron griddle, against the bluing flames. I cooked a flat cake, then a second, a third, and no, it was not the first one I prized, the one with the secretive smile, nor the one after that, whose eyes followed me around the room as I searched for the tub of butter. I enjoyed most that one on the bottom, the last and the least unleavened, the truly mysterious pancake, the faceless one, with no expression at all. So into this area of sort of no crimes, there are no crimes in this poem. I won't tell you what the title is. It's a word that my mother taught me to spell by giving me a special sentence so that I would always remember, so that it would be one of the few words that I didn't misspell in my spelling test. That's such a bad speller. I will tell you at the end. Betty had been wandering. Who knows how long? Not she. She feels like the girl on the Morton salt box, pressing one small shoe after the other into the glossy dark under a light salt rain. All around her is shimmering salt and sweet. And just as she's thinking of this or feeling this, she comes upon them, the apples. The plate golden, like the apples, some red, some gold and red like sunrise. How long since she's tasted such wildness, such wilderness, like life, like living the world as intended, as meant, the true and pure thing. She carries one in both hands to her mouth. The fragrance opens in the air, sweet and pointed, an inflorescence. She has begun her first apple, and there will be more, enough to nourish that flowing, that radiant, unfillable space. Betty can go anywhere, but there's nowhere she must be now. She wants to linger here, salt and sweet, shimmering, and this is for my mother, who taught me as a small girl what she, once a small girl, learned from her mother. A spelling, a spell. Betty eats apples until time is full. And the title is Utopia. I still wouldn't know how to spell it. I have two poems to close on. This is a little long, but the good news, that's bad news, it's a little long. But the good news is I read it really fast. It's thin, it's a thin, long poem. There used to be, there aren't as many as there used to be, but we had parrots, wild parrots, who used to just come down out of the sky, it seemed like, and just inhabit the trees around my place in northeast LA with this dramatic, this aggressive, this screeching, this clacking, this sound, this such a, I mean, I love them. They were so fierce, so aggressive, so unruly, and you tried to talk to them and they would not speak. They would, I mean, it's fabulous. The first time I heard it, I didn't know what was happening. It was like an assault out of the clouds. In this poem, it's very sort of aggressive. It's called Clamorous. It's very clamorous, but it has a beautiful name, which is why it kind of fits into the Utopia. And the other little thing I want to say about it is that it's filled with literary references. Rilke is in here, and Edgar Poe's in here, and so obviously I don't even finish the name. I just start the name and I say, you need me to finish the name. there an elegant this in here. It doesn't matter if you pick them up or not. I just use them for my own amusement. Oh, and it has an epigraph, very important epigraph. And the epigraph is, it's a woman's right to change her mind. Amen? Ancient proverb, who said it? Clamors the parrots in northeast LA. Oh, Timothy, there are whiny-like things happening. Strange, off-line, slant-line, slant-line, assonance, consonants, and all weird. Yeah, I'm glad you're saying that. All right. No spook pulls its late hooks, its late night mood onto my door like the shade of 10 hues crow while I'm situated at my desk and cat-gnawed chair, pondering, I like to think, a bit like Edward, you know. But instead, these clatterings, glass chipped, thorns, scarred, drop from the air, think desire, smashed to hunks, then rolled in red and green, feathered, tarred, where we imagine paradise, they carve their hungry lair. Now the berry trees pinned down by orneriness and greed, bird heads, bird skulls, hammer, it's dark, fat, beads, they hang face first, some do, red heads, green chest, rogue Santa elves, all itch and thirst. They grab things, demand more, won't turn down the volume of themselves. I shout, hello, hello, lost soul calling down assorted little wells. Which eye is I? They do not answer, these red brats, green brutes, all hue and cry, won't twist their necks like birds housed in a cage to fix me with one eye. And now the small, thick roots start smacking the roof. Something in that sound and sight takes me back. Some teenage boy, overripe, his long, untutored kiss. More good for him than me. It rains and rains, but no rain falls fat and juiced like this, engulfed with appetite, raw bliss. I try again. Hello. They rend and screech and riot, red scalps, green hearts, all cry and hue, as if necks caught in a noose still won't be quiet. But in their tiny brain pans, they boil into juice or stew. Red-headed words, bruised black and blue, the gift of speech. From down here, I feel it, dabs of chilly heat. Those words I can't get into, words fry me too, or haunt my inner ear. Green winged spawn of mermaids, mutants, clapping each to each, and now they break, come loose, all ratty, all hit and miss, like they did all many ages back out of the pound for dogs and cats, birds, refugio de animales del Niño Jesus, or Saint Francis, some saint on fire. Everyone around here's heard how the parents stake their claim, a shorted wire, toss match, cigarette. The crew unlatched the cages as they fled. So goes the legend. Only the mad escape like smokes in pages. Now more than ever red, casting themselves through flame-rimmed window grates, lit by startled. They do something like that here, shred off from now to there. Remember what I called them? Bad elves, inarticulate, all white and grind. Well, just forget it. Everything I said, I rescind. I invoke my sacred right to change my mind. See? Look how they transform mid-air. All imagination after all, and its power to redeem, unleashed from prison, borne up by stellar winds. See, look, oh Dick, oh Jane, those things ascending the unseen stair by stair toward the sounding deeps of heaven. That blue green air, like all we couldn't hold down, desire the world couldn't bear. After all these terrible things happen in this book called Climb Wave, terrible, bad, and awful, and then I close on a short poem that I dreamt. And I have a few poems that came to me in dreams. And this is a utopia. This is the impossible, dreamed of, imagined world. And of course, it happened for me, Utopia, in a strip mall in East Hollywood, where there was an all-night 24-hour donut shop. I was a city. And it was at the time, I lived right above that strip mall, and that was called the Donut Inn. And the epigraph is from Dorothy Brucey, who has a movie, she has a poem about movies, and it ends with the movie in his head is perfect. And this poem is called The City in My Head is Perfect. At the Donut Inn, all the men are in love. Women, more enchanting than ever and ever more, wander the empty lots calling like low swinging bells. Yet I am the object of this love and the destination saint of the freeway streets. This avenue, buses float down with their cargoes of light. Although some of these men I have seen now, they seem more than they were. They burn with something I want. Who cares what anyone thinks? The roar of traffic dispels its blessing everywhere, wave over wave. Like this, yes, almost like this, almost like the sea.
I want to acknowledge one more time our three features: Cecilia Wallach, Timothy Scale, and Suzanne Rundle. Yes, we're very blessed. This was a really noteworthy show, and hopefully soon we'll have that posted so that you can relive any of those moments. It was just exquisite. Writers, thank you very much. And I want to continue now with our open mic, and please remember, we'll keep it to 1 minute. If you see me starting to raise the bell, try and wrap things up. We left off with Leslie Monsour. Is that?
Mansour.
Mansour, thank you, Leslie. Leslie Mansour, please enjoy your time here for the next week.
Hello, it's great to be here. I'm going to read a sonnet from this new collection called Before the Forest Burns, speaking of the hoax. But when I think of Utopia, I think to each his own. I mean, some people think Las Vegas is Utopia. And so I think that the utopian ideal eventually gives way to the dystopian reality. And this poem is called Palm Springs Desert Dystopia. Now is the hour, the desert moon grows bright and floats above the mountains, while its fool twin hides in lights that light the swimming pool. And landscape boulders bake throughout the night, lit like stage props with floods of gold and pink. The desert's hardly desert anymore. The surest thing to come by is a drink, and sand mostly affects a golfing score. The Sinaloan pool man, after rain, finds drowned tarantulas around the drain. He scoops them in his net and then forgets he left them in the morning sun to dry. After he's gone, the clumps revivify and scatter like anarchic marionettes.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And we worked on this pronunciation before the show. Olivia, would you please pronounce your last name upon your arrival? Thank you, Olivia. Oh, into the microphone. Thanks. That way we'll have it on tape.
The title of this poem is taken from a line in a poem from García Lorca, A Romance Sonámbulo, which is from the Gypsy Ballads. Pero yo ya no soy yo. I search on the hidden face of the moon for the sadness my mother left on my temples every time she kissed me, missing me already. And the steady hunch with which I gamble an embryo of future for this American world. A memory of my beginning shapes into a feast. A home in the country crumbled long ago. I imagine I could return to the pine trees my father planted, swim in the same sea tinted the color of Homeric wine as sunset. Every meal, saffron threads bonded us. Colored filaments my mother toasted inside a white folded paper next to the fire. Between two unknowns, one here today, the other one when I left all the rice behind. Outside the window a local bird sings. I speak to it in one tone, dream in another, dressed with the garb of the beloved place of no return. The voice of my mother gone, my father's brow consumed by loneliness. I long for the blank page of the moon to write a song under swaying Aleppo trees. The sharp breeze is impairing the cadence of my language. Anoint myself with olive oil. Pero yo ya no soy yo, ni mi casa es ya mi casa. But I'm not who I was, and my house is no longer my home.
I want to invite up next Mary Ann Berry.
I don't know much anything really about quantum mechanics, but I think if we did understand quantum mechanics, maybe we would be in Utopia. So this was written after I watched a film during the pandemic, a film about David Bohm called Infinite Potential. Yesterday, for a microsecond, I imagined I had grasped quantum mechanics. I was a barefoot woman walking out of Mumbai, from my native village. And she was here, settling quietly in my chair. Neither of us had traveled. We had simply swapped our sacks of sorrow, turned them inside out, and sorted through the stones of grief, worn circular by the seasons of our lives. And it was one sack, one sorrow. We laid out the stones like a path for the elusive task of moving forward. One foot lifted, the other grounded, momentarily, just long enough to keep from falling.
Excellent, thank you. I want to make sure Steve Cohen had to leave or was unable to speak. Go on. I want to invite next in that case Jennifer Darland. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Darland. Come on, Darland.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Darland, and this poem is called One. The bell tolls new again, a spillway of inspiration, a corridor of new air. Auspicious arrival comes, the season's first rain. Benevolent Jupiter prophesizes love for all gods. Rows of popping colors spurt fruits and flowers. Groves of gardens and trees run races for miles. Our pulses heal with nature as mother. The rooted life on earth is breathing again. A clear drink from serpentine waters, we all eat. Learn the riches of squashes. We could toss them and paint their rhymes and play, singing, hey, each one of them is unique too. A cornucopia of beauty, such abundance matched. And then we join in a circle. Every type of soul you could ever imagine is there, promising to jump into the prism of love. And as a complete spectrum of light, we will charge together through storms. And miracles that we sometimes miss, we will start to notice. And onward we shall embark on a procession of magic. Release. We light the fire, the generous exhale that lets the night go out in perfect harmony. The smoke clears, forgiven, and we are one.
Really excellent, thank you. Everybody's doing well. I don't know if it's because they see me grabbing for the bell, but it's good. This is a real good exercise and sort of being cognizant of the program that you're presenting, and we have a really excellent house. So there's a good feedback. God, during COVID, there was nothing coming back through that screen in terms of getting a live human response. So excellent job, everybody. I'm very excited. Our next open mic reader also happens to be one of our featured readers next month. Next month, our reading is, again, on the 4th Sunday of October. That date happens to be October 26th, rather. Please welcome Catherine Van Der Water.
So next month I will be addressing my book, but this month I am going to read something that's not in it, but oddly fits the theme of Utopia. I realized, this is about a parade that aspires to Utopia. Hands for Love. They come marching down the boulevard with calling cards stuck in hatbands, gathering forces as they move like spilled buckets of paint down a hill. The Society of Hands Describing Love has gathered and started their own parade. No permit is applied for or approved in advance, so there may be trouble, but it is a peaceful, joyous crowd on the whole. Propeller beanies on curly heads. Participate. Make no mistake, some fingers are in casts, and there are not a few wrists wearing carpal tunnel braces. Hands that tell the love story don't always have it easy. Surprising, and not what you would think. Much turning of pages in libraries and bookstores is required in search of love's mention. And of course, its glorification by poets past, present, and future, one can only hope, needs a slower perusal, still tiring whatever the pace. Love songs can be a respite if only being listened to. If being played on guitars or drums or flugelhorns, well, you can see where the carpal tunnel can originate. So, shout your support. Better still, move off the sidewalk, get into the flow. Join the crushed who were kicked for love, the unscathed holding slogans in support of it, and make yourselves known. There's a place for the shy in the center of the flow where you will be upheld by the crush of those who buffer. Right there, with the shy, are babies being pushed in swings on wheels. How they chortle with glee. Thank you.
We will be chortling a lot next month. October 26th, please grab a flyer, or if we have your email, you'll be hearing from us. Next, I want to invite up Miles Ketchum. I can't pronounce that correct. There you go.
Okay, so I've never read here before, and this also isn't about Utopia, so please don't throw your tomatoes at me.
Yeah.
It's a very short poem about my favorite, one of my favorite tropes, cowboys who are secretly fond of each other. This poem is titled Cabin in the Fields of Wheat. After their women and children sleep in the fields within one's cabin, two herders of the same cloth and same sex lay stiff-racked in their soft bedrolls, warm and anxious to meet their wives in the morning. Thank you. That's all I have.
Hey, see, I could have given that extra time. Catherine.
I got the bell.
Yeah, we did our best. We appreciate it, Miles. We wanted to make sure everybody knew it was a minute of your choice, or you can talk on the theme. But we're glad, like, our features found volumes that related to the theme. This was a really terrific idea in terms of bringing a utopia of poets together to feel like a community here this last Sunday of September. So next, for instance, I'm curious to find out if our next reader is going to address the subject of utopia. God only knows. He's featured next month, but we want to bring him up for a minute today. Please welcome Joe Kamhai.
And anyone can play. The breeze is brushing softly against his wrinkled cheek. The air was warm and full of fun. Small boys played hide and seek. He tossed spread balls one by one to ducks in the moss-capped creek. She looked so sad and lonely, the old man had to speak. Come follow me and we'll have fun. I'll take you to a place with ice cream trees and everyone there has a smiling face. Where birds are made of bubblegum, where bees and chocolate cake. Boys and girls play hide and seek down by the milkshake creek. Oh, fire and milk, take it in! And Brown kicked down the door. Her saw at first, those both eyes cursed and threw up on the floor. Oh, Flanagan said, why didn't you see this scene before? Staring at slaughter through salty water, he sounded so unsure. 10 cops inside, 10 cops wide-eyed, glaring at guts and gore, while spotted with blood so thick like mud, it lay flat on the floor. Detective Pratchett found his hatchet hidden behind the door. The house surrounded, the cops confounded. This one was number 4. Oh, Flanagan, in angry grin, he clenched his fist and swore, we'll nail him fast. These kids is last. He won't get any more. But he was in another town telling young girls tales of talking dogs and chocolate boats with cherry-flavored sails, where children never go to school, they laugh and sing all day, where adults serve and children rule. Anyone can play.
That was great. I don't need to be ashamed that I enjoyed that, right? I'll be reading it for sure. Awesome. Looking forward to the show. That was great. Just we're getting down to it here. Well, then, I would like to invite up our very last open mic reader for the day. Please welcome Beverly LaFontaine.
Thank you very much. So, this is about Utopia gained and Utopia lost. It's called Black Lung, Grim Future for Younger Miners. 44 and wasting, the coal miner says, it's like somebody sitting on your chest all the time. He covers his nose and mouth with a mask. The ventilator resumes its vigil. Outside, the sun barely warms the Kentucky's air as clouds rush to fill the coming night sky. The miner, his body a pot-bellied skeleton, reminisces about a short-lived youth when he felt like a man. His willingness to make the mind yield the wealth of its deepest crevices a source of pride. The price steep as his lungs coalesce with the dusty air, black lung. His father and grandfather were hollow men at 60 years of age. Thanks to technology, his digs were deeper, deadlier. You'll die to make other men rich, his father said. But $50 an hour and overtime meant he could keep his promise to the woman he married. Bitter this now. Her meager earnings, 5 days a week, steering a school bus are all that keep a tinny roof over their heads. With little hope, he joins the vigil of stick men outside the office of the senator who doesn't come home to Kentucky anymore.